Begin the current Daf Mesechtes Nedarim Daf Mem Beis. Begin on the top line of the Amud, where the Gemara continues again the theme of the previous Mishnayos regarding this, what we call a Hamudr Hanom Mechaveroi. Someone had taken a neder prohibiting benefit from his friend, what the halachas are going to be. For today's daf. Some of the discussed in today's daf are one specific halacha of a mudr hano's benefits on the madr's sada and peiros, as the Mishnah differentiates, which it's a very ambiguous, very the Mishnah is not clearly defined, and we'll have different interpretations of the Gemara. But the Mishnah does say clearly there's a difference between Kaidim Shvius before Shemitah and B'Shvius and Shemitah, which obviously the difference would be if you're making your stuff prohibited in Shemitah, obviously it's not yours and it's permitted for everyone. The question is how that plays itself out, as the Gemara brings two different ways of defining what the neder was. Either you said Nechasim Elu Alecha, these assets, or Nechasai Alecha, my assets. What's the difference? Mine or these? It's referring to the same things. Well, when it's Shemitah, it's not yours anymore. So that's obviously going to be a very relevant difference between those two different versions. And which that relates to an important theme throughout this stuff of Ein Adam Oisha Al-Chaver Dabashin B'Shusai. You cannot make something on someone else, somebody that's not yours. So in Shemitah, you don't own it, you can't make it forbidden. But Adam Oisha Al-Chaver, but a person can make something forbidden on his friend, Dabashin B'Shusai, Afel L'Kishayetze B'Shusai. I'm going to make it forbidden on you now, even when I'm not around anymore, when it's not mine, it's still going to be forbidden on you. If someone has the ability to do that, that we'll see is a discussion in the Gemara. So begin the current Daf Membei, says the Mishnah, the top of the Amud. Hamud Hanom Mechaveroi, if someone is prohibited from having benefit from his friend based on the neder, Lifnei Shvius, before the Shemitah, so in the Yard L'Techzadeyum, he can't even go into the field of the Madr, of the one who prohibited him from a neder, because as the Ram brings, obviously, like those halachas that those who hold that a mudr is forbidden even by drisus irregular, as we learned in the Mishnah, Daf Lamed Beis and Beis, that's who our Tanoim of our Mishnah are going like, that even just to walk on his property is something forbidden, so you can't go into his field. And you can't even eat from the fruits that are tilting out of the field onto the road, because that's still having benefit from him. So you can't go into his field and not eat from the pears. You can't have from his pears, even though not in this field. You can't have any hanof from the person. That's before Shemitah. Now, is now in the Shemitah year. My question is what that exactly is going to mean. The Gemara will explain this. But in the Shemitah year, you cannot go into his field, because again, you're still prohibited to have benefit from him. But you could eat from those plants that are tilting out of the field, because that's not in his rishus right now, because it's the Shemitah year. And it's not even in his property, so then you're allowed to eat from those fruits, even though it's originates from this guy's field. Now, this is all told about if he's mudr hana. What's the nodr and Michael, which again was actually the title of this parak in bein mudr. We said between a mudr hana and mudr Michael. So the contrast is, let's say nodr and Michael of nishvias. He didn't prohibit all benefit, just of food before the Shemitah year. Okay, then yerlu techsadei could go into his field because that's not considered Michael. But obviously cannot eat from his peiros because the neder of the food. Now in the Shemitah year, obviously you could go in because you only made a neder of food, not of hana. And you could eat also because it's Shemitah and it's not his peiros, and therefore you'd be able to go in and to eat. Okay, says the Gemara. The Gemara has two different interpretations. It's going to be complex. We're going to go with the Ran to see what is the Gemara's Shaka Bataria. Says Gemara, Rabbi Shmuel Damat Tavaya, they both say, which sounds like they're explaining the halacha of the Mishnah, as follows. Nechasim elu olecha. If someone says, these nechasim, these peiros, these fruits, these are forbidden on you. Lefnei Shvius, before the Shemitah year, okay, ein yard l'techsedeyu, he cannot go into his field because, again, he made all hanav of these, which is all his assets, his whole estate is forbidden, so he can't go into the field. And he cannot eat from any of the fruits that are either tilt out of the field. Even if when it already becomes Shemitah. What do you mean, Shemitah? I can't eat from the peiros? Shemitah, everything's hefker. Says the Ran, Rabbi Shmuel hold that even though all the peiros are hefker, even so, when he made the neder, it was his. So the Isser takes effect that even in Shemitah, when it goes out of his rishus, it remains Asr to the subject of the neder, which the Mishnah is teaching us two dinim. The Reish is telling us that since he went, and this is very important because we're going to try to figure out, according to whatever the interpretations are, with what's called the Reish and the Seifa, meaning regarding before Shemitah and by Shemitah, because that's what the Mishnah was talking about. It was talking about Lefnei Shvius and Nubah Shvius. So according to Rabbi Shmuel, the way the Gemara understands right now, the Mishnah is telling us two halachas. The Reish is telling us that since you took the neder before Shvius, before the Shemitah year, the neder is going to take effect, and even when it actually becomes Shemitah, it's still going to remain usher for that subject of the vow. So based on that, the Seifa, when it's telling us Uba Shvius, doesn't mean when the Shemitah year comes around, that then it's going to be mutter to eat. No, it's talking about, because they said that even when the Shemitah year is going to come around, it's still going to remain forbidden. Rather, in B'Shvius, Nadar, if he took the neder during the Shemitah year, right? We said when we were reading the Mishnah, it wasn't clear what does it mean Lifnei Shvius and B'Shvius. The way that we're explaining with Rabbi Shmuel right now is that even if you took the neder, even if it's Shemitah, but if you took the neder before Lifnei Shvius, it remains forbidden. And the safest teaching is in B'Shvius Nadar, although that the neder cannot take effect regarding the peri because it's already hefker, but it could take effect regarding the land, as the Gemara is going to explain the reason later on. So ein yer l'tich sedeyu, so you cannot go into his field because that he could make forbidden, and aval oichel min hanoitis. But he could eat from the fruits that are tilting out of the field because it's already hefker. You can't make that forbidden. That's one interpretation of Rav and Shmuel. Now the Gemara brings another interpretation, that of Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg, the Amr Tavayu. They both say that the following words, Nichsai olecha. So these are different words. The words of Rabbi Shmuel were Nechasem Elu olecha. These Nechasim. Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg, they say Nechasai olecha. My Nechasim are forbidden on you. Okay. Lefnei Shvius, before the Shemitah year. Okay, it's his field, it's his nechasim, nechasai, can't go into the field. And you cannot eat from even the fruits that tilt out. Higia shvius, now again, higia shvius. You see that they're already reading this differently. Besides that, it's a different case of nechasai. They're interpreting the Mishnah, not if you took the neder b'shvius, higia shvius. You took the neder beforehand, and now, when it reaches Shemitah, okay, in your you still can't go down into this field, but you could eat from the fruits. That is, because it does not become forbidden because of the neder that you took before the Shemitah year. So they're translating Uba Shvius, not like Rabbi and Shmuel that you take a neder in the Shemitah year. No, that original neder that you took, now when it reaches Shemitah year, then it's already going to be mutter because it's hefker. Yeah, and then what's the case of Uba Shvius? That's a new case when you took a neder in the Shemitah year, because the neder you took before the Shemitah will remain usher even during Shemitah. Whereas Rabbi Yochanan and Lakish, they say that they don't talk about when you took a neder in the Shemitah year. They say Uba Shvius, when the Mishnah says Uba Shvius means, and when it reaches the Shemitah year, then it's going to be mutter. Which Gemara right now is going to try to point out what they feel the machlekes is. But I'm just pointing that out. They're reading the Mishnah differently. But Shvius is not another case, according to Rabbi Yochanan and Lakish. It's just now when it reaches Shemitah, the halacha is going to change. It's going to become mutter the peiros. Why is that? So the Gemara says, I'll tell you why. Let's say there's machlekes between Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Yochanan and Lakish is on the following idea. The Rabbi Shmuel Sabi, they both hold Adam Oyser Davish B'Shusay. A person can make something forbidden in his property. Even later when he's going to leave his rishus. So therefore, they say when you took the neder lefnei shvius, the halacha that the Reisha says that you're going to be asked to eat his pears is even in the Shemitah year. I mean, Shemitah year, it's hefker. Yeah, but I can make something forbidden. It's mine now. I'm going to make this asa on you forever, even when it leaves my rishus like in the Shemitah year. Whereas Rabbi Yochanan and Lakish, they hold no. So you cannot make something forbidden so that when it goes ahead and leaves your rishus. Now the Ran here he explains that the Gemara right now assumes, it is very important to understand, that Rav Shmuel, Rabbi Yochanan and Lakish, they're all going to explain the halacha of the Mishnah. Rav and Shmuel are explaining, like we mentioned, that it's two different cases. There's making a neder lifnei shvius, and is making a neder on Shvius, on Shemitah year, Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg explained it that it's one case. It's all talking about when you took the neder before the Shemitah year. And they're saying that this neder has two different halachas. Before the Shemitah year, so the neder takes total effect, where you cannot go down to his field and you cannot eat. But when it reaches the Shemitah year, so then it becomes partially permitted, because although you still cannot go down into his field, because, as the Gemara is going to tell us later on, ultimately the land is still somewhat in his rishus, even though Lamaisa and Shemitah, we know you're allowed to go down to people's fields. Even so, the peiros are going to be permitted. Why? Because in the Shemitah year, it gets removed from his rishus, from his domain. And even though he took the neder on the person at a time when it was still in his rishus, which was before the Shemitah year, Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg both hold that a person cannot make something forbidden, even when it's his rishus, for this when it's going to go out of his rishus later on. Now, although it comes out that therefore the Reish is not really teaching us anything, because obviously that before the Shemitah year you cannot go down to his field, you cannot eat the fruits. What would be the chiddush in that? So they hold that you're right. What's called nokad reisha mishum seifa. We picked the case of the reisha of lefnei shvis because the seifa of during Shemitah to tell us that even though he took the neder before the Shemitah year when the peiros were in his rishus, but the isser is not going to take effect for when it leaves the rishus, which is during the Shemitah year itself. And therefore, we would have thought to say that they hold that a person cannot make something forbidden when it's his rishus, when it's going to leave his rishus, even when he says that, and this is going to be very important because this is going to go right into the next part of the Gemara, even when he says nechasim elu, right? What was the words of Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg? Besides the fact that we were able to point out that they're having a machlekes regarding how to interpret uba shviyas, is that a new case that you took the neder in the Shemitah year, or it's like, no, it's the same case, it's just, and in the Shemitah year it's going to be permitted. We pointed out that the words were different. Rabbi Shmuel said, Nechasam elu alecha, and Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg said, Nechasai alecha. The Ran has to double down on this point now and say that the Gemara assumes right now that Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg, that they hold that you could not make something forbidden right now for afterwards, is not only like the words that they said of Nechasai, but rather has to mean also, even the case of Nechasim elu, these Nechasim, which were the same words of Rabbi Shmuel, that is, and even if maybe you could say, even when he says explicitly that he wants to make it forbidden after it leaves Rishus, no, the Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg is saying you can't do that. You can't ask for something for when it leaves your Rishus. Now, Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg, they don't say that case of explicitly mentioning. They don't even say Nechasim elu. They say Nechasai. Nechasai means only when it's mine. Says the Ran, no, you have to say it's even my Nechasim elu. Why? Because if you say that Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg are talking about, even when you say Nechasim elu, you could say, like we just said, that what's the chiddush of the Mishnah? The Reisha, because of the Seifa. And although Rabbi Yechanan and Rish Lakish say Nechasai, you have to say it's Lav Davka that they said Nechasai. Rather, it's going on the case of Nechasim elu, the Rabbi Shmuel we're talking about, that Nechasim elu is like Nechasai, meaning that just like Nechasai would only be as long as it's mine, but after that it's not. That's really what Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg mean to say. The Nechasim elu is also the same thing. It's only going to be us as long as it's mine. Because if you think the say Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg are specifically talking about a case of Nechasai, my Nechasim, so then what's the time of the Mishnah telling us? The Reisha for sure does not tell us anything. Of course, the Lefnei Shemitah neder is going to take effect. What's a chiddush? It's a regular neder that a person took. And if you're going to say, no, we only said the Reisha because of the Seifa, to tell us that since in the beginning you said Nechasai, so when it reaches Shemitah, it's part of the neder is going to be permitted, meaning that now he's going to be able to eat the peiros. That I don't need to tell us. That's obvious, because the word Nechasai only sounds like as long as it's in your Rishus. Because says the Ran, we wouldn't need our Mishnah to say that. We have a bigger chiddush than this in the parak later on, Daf Mem Vav Med Aleph, which the Sugi is going to bring this later very shortly. If let's say someone says to his friend, I'm taking a kainim, a neder, that your house I'm never going to enter, your field I'm never going to buy. When that guy dies or he sells it to someone else, you're permitted to buy that field. You're permitted to enter into that house because it's not his house anymore. You didn't say that house. You said your house. It's not your house. Now, says the Ran, since when the guy himself makes the neder, he's called the neder, well, you have no doubt that of course he can make something forbidden on himself that's his friends, even after it's not his friends anymore. He could have said whatever he wants. He can make it forbidden on himself forever. Still, we say when he says Beischa, your house, It's only as long as it's his house. So for sure, the madir, not the noider, the madir, where it's not so clear, could he make something forbidden that's his for when it leaves his domain? So then obvious that the word nechasai would only make it forbidden as long as it's in his domain. Because most definitely when the noider says your house or your property, and when the madir says my house or my property, they're the same thing. So therefore, if according to Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg, it's specifically by case of nechasai that a person cannot make it forbidden, so Tal Mishnah is not telling us anything, not by the Reisha and not by the Seifa. So therefore, most definitely, says the Ran, Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg, obviously, and this is what the Gemara is obviously understanding, that you need this Ran, right? If you didn't say this Ran, you'd be, okay, Schwartzberg, the Daf took is quicker. But you wouldn't know why the Gemara is assuming what it's assuming when they didn't even say Nechasam Elu. The Gemara is about to ask certain questions, and without the Ran, it wouldn't make sense. Because why are you making such? They said Nechasai, yeah, Nechasai. They said the Ran, but that wouldn't be any Chiddush. So obviously, Rich and Shlokish are even talking about the case of Rabbi Shmuel, of Nechasam Elu, that even then, but Elu is not mine. Elu are these. Even over there, a person cannot make it forbidden, and now the Mishnah makes sense. Why it's the Mishnah telling us? Reisha Mishum Seifa, to tell us that even when he makes a neder in the words of Nechasam Elu, still his neder is not going to take effect for when it leaves his Rishus. And that's a Chiddush. Don't say that just like the Gemara says later on the Mem Zayin Med Aleph. When the Noider, when he says, it doesn't say your house. He says, this house I'm never going to enter. Oh, then when the guy dies or sells to someone else, it's going to be usher. That's going to be forbidden even if it leaves that guy's Rishus. So you would say the same thing over here when someone makes a neder to his friend and tells him, Nechasam Elu, these Nechasim should be forbidden for you, that the Issa should take effect even after it leaves the Rishus. So the Madir, that's a Chiddush. That was saying, no, it's not the case. Because that's only when the guy's making the neder himself, meaning the noider on himself, that he can make it forbidden, whatever's his friends, even after it leaves his friend's domain, which doesn't have to be his friends. But by the matter, no, because when it leaves his rishos, it's not yours, it's someone else's. And like the words are in odem oitz nichse chaver al chaveroi. You can't make someone else's thing forbidden on someone else. You sold it, it's not yours. And therefore, the Mishnah would make sense. That's how the Gemara is at this point right now, according to the Ran, that this is the machlekes Rav and Shmuel and Rabbi and Rish Lakish regarding the case of Nechasam Elu. They're all talking about the same case, even though the wording is different. The Gemara is assuming right now they're all talking about the same case. These Nechasam are forbidden you. Can you make it forbidden after leaves your shus or not? That's the machlekes in the Gemara of, and therefore they have different interpretations how to read the Mishnah. If you hold that you can make it forbidden, great. So then you can't say that's the case of the Mishnah as one lone case. You have to say Bashvis is, and you took the neder during the Shemitah. Because if you took it beforehand and you could make it forbidden, then it would still be forbidden in Shemitah. But Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg hold that you cannot. Oh, so good, it's one lone case. If you took it before the neder before Shemitah, it's going to be usher to eat the pears. Well, Bashvis is mutter. Because you can't usher it when it's going to be Yotzi Mishrusi, which in Shemitah goes out. Now we understand why they made different interpretations in the Sefer, the Mishnah of the Bashvis. Now the Gemara asks, is it really logical what you're saying? Is there anyone who would say you cannot make forbidden something in your property when it's going to leave your property? That's how you just explained for me, Rabbi Yochanan Rish Lakish. You told me they hold that you cannot make it forbidden, and therefore it's going to be mutter in the Shemitah year. But in Cain, if that's the case, that according to Rabbi Yochanan Rish Lakish, that they hold you cannot make it usher, then Nifligi, they should have disagreed explicitly when you say B'nechasam Elu, when you say these Nechasim, and Mekoshkim and Nechasai, for sure when they say the words B'nechasai, you're telling me that they're talking about a case of Nechasim Elu. Why don't they say that? Okay, that's one question. The Ran made it sound like, okay, that, even though they only said Nechasai, but that could mean we want Nechasim Elu is like Nechasai. But Vesu, this is a more difficult question. Hatznan, learn in the Mishnah, I'm going to show you an explicit Mishnah that says that you could make something forbidden in your property even when it's going to leave your property. That's not like learn the Mishnah later on, the Mem Zayin Med Aleph. Mishnah says as follows: if someone says to his son, Kainim, the lashon of a carbon, a neder, shata nenisli, that you're going to have any benefit from me. Your son, you're son and non grata. No hana. Mace, when the father passed away, Yerushalayim, the son will inherit him because he's not benefiting from the father. The Torah is giving him this Yerusha. So although Pops says, you're not getting any no hana from me, it's too late. It's not from you. It's gonna be Yarshna. But let's say the father says, oh, I'm smarter than you. B'chayav u'b'maisai. Says, you're not getting any benefit from me, not when I'm alive and not when I'm dead. Says the Gemara Number Beis. Then the halacha is amazed. Then when the father drops dead, lo yershana. He's not going to yarish him. Now the Ran says it doesn't really mean he's not going to yarish him, because these nechasim most definitely are his, as the Gemara is going to explain later on. The Ran's going to explain Daf Mem Zayin. It's just because the Tana said in the Reisha Yerushan he will inherit him, which that just meant to say he's going to have the same halacha like other yarshim, even to benefit from the chasim. So the Sefer says lo yershana. It just means to say that he's not going to be permitted to have benefit from the Yerusha. But of course, he'll yashna. Fine. But one thing is that we hear from this, that a person could make his payers forbidden on someone else even after he leaves his rishus, like when he dies. And it's not like making someone else's nechasim forbidden on someone else. You do have the ability to do that. So that refutes the premise that you're telling me. You're telling me Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Shloimy are saying that you can't make something forbidden after it leaves your property. So this guy took a neder before Shemitah, and they say, Uba Shviyas, they're learning our Mishnah says, and when our Mishnah says, but Shviyas, that of course he could eat from it. Well, I made him forbidden. No, but it's the Yotzim Rishusai. But I made it before Yotzim Rishusai. No, you can't make a neder Likashu Yotzim Rishusai. I can't? What do you mean? There's an explicit Mishnah on Daf Mem Zayin that says clearly that if he says B'chayv B'maisai, it will be forbidden Likashu Yotzim Rishusai when he's going to die. So how can you tell me that they're holding that you can't make such a neder? Yeah, because it's Issa of a neder. So it's like it's yours, but that you can't have any hana from me. What? No, but the neder is nice taking effect. Yeah, we'll see maybe in the Mezayim exactly how to qualify what's actually happening. But Lamaisa, the neder is taking effect, right? Even when it's likashiyatz and meshusay. So the question is, but you told me Birchim Shlakish hold. No, the guy's dead. He doesn't know. No, the father. The father's not his. It's not any less than Shemitah. Shemitah is the guy's not dead, right? It's not yours anymore. You have no more rights anymore. Anyone could come and take. So the Gemara says, Shani Hacha. No, here it's different because they're called Amalei B'chayva B'maisa, because he told them when he's alive or when he's dead. So it's a finer point. The Ran says, it's like when you're having a disagreement with someone, you're like, okay, I'll give you on that point. So it's like Nechay's Darga. They're going down a notch from what they originally thought. The Gemara originally thought, up until this point, that according to Birchim Shlakish, there's no wording that you could say to make anything forbidden for after it leaves your property. Because that's like Nichse Chaver Chaveroi. That's what they thought originally. No, carte blanche, there's no way you can't make something forbidden that's not yours. Now the Gemara is agreeing that when you're explicit in your words, you could make it forbidden. But if this was the only question we had, so we could have said, okay, that although when you are explicit with your words, you could make it forbidden, even so, when you say nechasim elu, these nechasim, that still only sounds like as long as it's in your rishus. Because even though the Matt is saying nechasim elu, these nechasim, and when the Noider says your house, these are the same types of words, or not your house, even though that's the gears that we have, but it should say bayis in the Ran. That and the Mishnah tells later on by the Noider when he says bayizeh, that sounds like even after it leaves his domain. So here you also should have said when the Madda says these nechasim, since he's saying words that would be even la'achar she'atzim meshusay, you should make it aser. And that says around, no, it's not the same thing, because when a noider says this house, it sounds like this house itself he doesn't like, either because he doesn't like the blue siding, or because it has bad mazel, or for some whatever other reason. He's saying this house, not your house. So it would make sense. It has nothing to do with the original owner. It's going to always be forbidden. But when the mother, not the case that Rabbi Yochanan and Shlakish are talking about in our Mishnah, when the mother says to the mudder, these nechasim, wherever he's not explicit to say that even when it's going to go out of his rishus, it sounds like it's only problematic when it's in his rishus. Because why should it bother him if the other guy's going to benefit by something that he has nothing on, when it's not, he has no portion in that at all? So although he says these nechasim, it means because it's his. So wherever he's not explicit, he just in nechasim elu, it only sounds like it's a problem when it's in his rishus, and therefore the Mishnah makes sense, because that's the halacha that the Mishnah is coming to teach us, that you have to be explicit to make it aser, and that's a bigger chiddush. And that's what you're saying. The Reisha is Mishum the Sefer to tell us that when you say nechasim elu, that that's what we're saying, that it's still going to be mutter when it comes to the Shemitah year. So based on that question that you're asking from the Mishnah Mem Zayin, that wouldn't be difficult because, hey, there you said explicitly, I want to be Aser b'chayiv b'maisik. Okay, shkach, that you could do. But if you didn't say, you're just in the Chasam Elu, so then you're right. That's what the Chiddush Mishnah is saying. That's not explicit, and therefore when it's the Shemitah year, it's going to be mutter. The problem is, it was one more question. We had the original question was Mikamakum Kasha, that it's still not fully resolved. Because the first question was that if Rabbi Yechon and Mishlakish really were saying that it's on the Chasam Elu, why did they say Nechasai? They should have said that it's even on the case of that Rabbi Shmuel Tomar of Nechasam Elu. Taylor rather says the Gemara because of that question, because the Maisa they said Nechasai and not Nechasam Elu, although the Ran explained why you could understand that to mean that, but the Gemara is falling off from their interpretation. They say, okay, but Nechasam Elu, truth is, when you say the words, these Nechasim, you're right, no one's going to disagree that you're right. You could make it forbidden forever, even when it's going to go out of your shus. Because you said these. It's like when the Neider says, it's forbidden forever. Here also, when he says, Nechasim Elu, these, not mine, these, everyone agrees it's going to be us. What's the machlekes in our Gemara is benachasai. When he says, my Nechasim. Rav and Shmuel Sabi, they both hold Loishna Nechasim Elu, Loishna Nechasai. Doesn't make a difference. These, mine, Adam Eiser. A person could make it forbidden, even when he says Nechasai, it will be forbidden. So wait a second. Now the question is the other way around. Actually, the Ran asks. I mean, Rav and Shmuel only said on Nechasim Elu. So what's this? So why they say Elu? Says the Ran. That was Lav Davka, because that was obvious to them. Wherever you say Nechasai, even when you say Elu, it's still only qualifying on the Nechasai. And even so, a person could go ahead and make it forbidden. And whether because Nechasai also means like forever, and Elu is that are my Nechasim right now, or because that once the Isser takes effect, it can't be removed. So they don't care. It's not even Nechasim Elu, even Dafka. They hold even Nechasai, which even though usually Nechasai mine should be not a problem afterwards. No, Nechasai doesn't mean Dafka when it's mine. Those which are mine right now, but that I can make forbidden forever, either because of that or because it's just there's no way for the Isser to be released. So even though Shemitah comes along, it's already a devout Isser. You can't, Hefka is not going to take care of that Isser. Now, Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg, they hold, no, and the Ger says, Nechasim Elu, when you say these Nechasim, okay, the Meiser person, you're saying these, that's going to be forever. Nechasai, my Nechasim, Ein Adam Eiser, that a person cannot make it forbidden forever. So now the Mishnah makes sense for Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg, just like it made sense for Rav and Shmuel. Because according to Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg, they're explaining it that our Mishnah is specifically talking about when you say Nechasim Elu. And the Reish is actually telling us a Chiddush that even though when it reaches the Shemitah year, you cannot go down and you cannot eat from the fruits because a person can make something in his Rishus forbidden, likshayetze mishusai, when you say Nechasim Elu. The Sefer is telling us a Chiddush that if he took the neder in the Shemitah year, what's the Chiddush over there? That you can't even go down into his field, which that is a Chiddush because ultimately we know for the laws of Shemitah, you're allowed to go into someone else's field to take the payers. Chiddush is that you cannot go down into his field even though he's taking the neder in the Shemitah year itself. Now, Rabbi Yechon and Rish Lakish, they said the case was Nechasai Alecha. So that's what's bothering the Ran. What do you mean? You're telling me that they're telling me the case in Nechasim Elu, but they say Nechasai Alecha. So says the Ran, it's not because they were explaining that as the case of the Mishnah of Nechasai. They were rather responding to Rav and Shmuel. And they were telling to them, wait a second, if the Tana is talking about a case of Nechasai, then he wouldn't have said what he said. Rather, the halacha would have been that before the Shemitah year, he would not be able to go into the field and eat. When it would reach the Shemitah year, he'd be able to eat. Because again, they hold Nechasai is limited. So, but if that's the case, then the Mishnah wouldn't be teaching us anything. Rather, Vadai, most definitely, the Mishnah is talking about Nechasim Elu. So it's like you have to read this. Without the round, you wouldn't know what's going on, right? By the way, just as a correction, I read also, as a tech, I said yesterday, just to clarify, bayin doesn't mean eggs, like we said. That bayin means that you need. So whoever heard the shir yesterday, I met someone at a simcha last night. He says he watched on Torah anytime. So if you saw that, wasn't that bayin that the eggs are like the meat? It's bayin he needs. So anyway, so the way to read the Gemara over here is, although the words of Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg were the words of Nachasai, they're responding to Rav and Shmuel. That if you were saying it's Nachasai, it would have to be a certain halacha that it would be mutter in Shemitah. But the way they're reading the case of the Mishnah is actually Nachasim Elu. And therefore the Ned is going to take effect even after it's going to reach the Shemitah year. That's where the Gemara is at this point right now. But then the Gemara still continues to ask and says, wait a second, now the question is the other way around. Is there someone that is Rabbi Shmuel who holds that loishno nechasim elu b'loishno nechasai? That really there's no difference if you say these nechasim or my nechasim, meaning that even when you say nechasai, my nechasim, that still you tell me that nechasim are going to be forbidden even after it leaves his reshus? But v'tanan, we learn in the Mishnah of Memba Mad Aleph that even regarding the neider, which again, when the neider does it, it's more chamer, because when a guy wants to make someone else's stuff forbidden on him, he can make it forbidden whenever, as long as he wants to, because it's on himself. And still we'll see, if someone says to his friend, I'm taking in that I'm going to go into your house, that I'm going to buy your field, what's the halacha then? So the guy dies, or he sells to someone else, mutter, it's permitted. And this is the neider himself, which he can make it forbidden on himself as long as he wants to. But if he said yours, it's going to be mutter. In contrast, it says, into this house I'm going to enter. So the zushan this field that I'm going to buy. Then, then when he dies or sells to someone else, then it's going to be forbidden. So you see that when he says labeischa, it's only as long as it's that guy's, but not after he sells it off to someone else. Oh, so then for sure by the mother, where it's not so pashut that when he says nechasai, for sure it's only going to be forbidden as long as it's in his domain. So how can you tell me Rabbi Shmuel is saying that no matter if you say nechasai or nechasim el, it's always going to be forbidden? So now we have the question the other way, according to them. How can you say it's always going to be forbidden? Even saying nechasai. So the Gemara concludes, Ella, rather, Kiyami Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg ben nechasai. Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg told about the case of nechasai, and now actually back to the original words that we said. So actually now everything is as the words were, but it took us a while. And Rabbi Shmuel ben nechasim elu and v'loy pligi. In other words, it's a whole different Gemara now, where the Gemara is ending up. Rabbi Shmuel, they explained the halacha of the Mishnah when you said nechasim elu, these nechasim. Now, since you said elu, even though you said it's not nechasim elu, meaning it's nechasai elu. That's important just to point out. Not nechasim. We were reading all along nechasim elu, these nechasim. So nechasim elu are like bayazeh. No, it's nechasai elu. Now, although you said nechasai, it's as if you said nechasim elu. And therefore it's going to be aser, even after it reaches the Shemitah year. And that's the chiddush of the Reisha, that it's going to be forbidden, even once it comes into the Shemitah year. Now, Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg, they also explain the Mishnah like this, and they say, no, that don't entertain that the Mishnah is saying that even when it reaches the Shemitah year, you cannot go down and you cannot eat. To say that it's talking about even by nechasai. And the reason why you would say that is because since the Issur already took effect before Shemitah, it's not going to be removed. And that's what the Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg is saying, no, you don't say that. Rather, wherever you only said nechasai, then it's not going to be forbidden only as long as it's in his reshus. When it reaches the Shemitah year, then he could eat from the noitais because the Issur is removed. And so therefore, most definitely, the Mishnah is not going to be talking about but a case of nechasim elu. And that's why it's going to be forbidden when it reaches the Shemitah year. So essentially, no one's disagreeing. They're all saying, one's saying the case of nechasai, that the Rabbi Shmuel are saying nechasim elu, and Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg are saying b'nechasai, which the Ran is explaining, that they're actually both saying the same thing. That they're not disagreeing about it. They're just different ways of saying the same thing, which the Ran actually just points out. He says, I don't know why the Gemara in the conclusion, when it says Rabbi Yechon Shlakish before Rav and Shmuel, it should have said Rav and Shmuel first, like throughout the whole sugya, and then Rabbi Yechon Shlakish. So he says, no, to the contrary, that's exactly the point. Because the whole Shagatar of the sugya, we had been saying that Rabbi Yechon Shlakish were only responding to Rav and Shmuel to disagree on them. And that's how we were explaining when they said those words of Nachasim Eilu, they really didn't mean that. They were just saying that that's what you're saying and we're saying something else. So therefore, when now the Gemara is coming out that they're not disagreeing, we specifically wanted to put Rabbi Yechon Shlakish first before Rav Shmuel to say that no, they're not even going on their teaching whatsoever. And so therefore, the Gemara is really coming out that they're not disagreeing. Again, just that Rav and Shmuel are saying the case of the Mishnah is Nachasai Elu, that when you say Elu, even though you say Nachasai, it's like you're saying Nachasim Elu. So when our Gemara is saying Rabbi Shmuel ben Nachasim Elu, according to the Ran, it's where you said Nachasai Elu, and the Chiddush is it's as if you said ben Nachasim Elu. And Yechon Shlakish, that they also say that the Mishnah is talking about like that. So when they're saying ben Nachasai, when the Gemara is saying they're saying ben Nachasai, what are they saying? So all he's saying is that don't entertain to say that the Mishnah halacha is talking about ben Nachasai. When again, so it's just hard to translate. So just reiterating this. Ki amri Rabbi Yechon Shlakish, when they say ben Nachasai, their teaching was in ben Nachasai to say that that can't be what the Mishnah is talking about, because if that was the case, then that's what they were explaining what would be by Nachasai. By Nachasai, it would not be forbidden once it comes to Shemitah year, because mine is only as long as it's mine. But in the Mishnah, they explain also ben Nachasim Elu, and that's why it will be forbidden after Shemitah year. So again, no one's disagreeing. It's just very complex how to translate the words, but they're all saying the same halacha that Nachasai is limited, and Nachasim Elu will be forbidden even when it comes to the Shemitah year. Now, the Mishnah then concluded and said, "B'shviyis," on this halacha at least, "B'shviyis ein yor l'tech sedei b'chulu." Now, in the Shemitah year, you cannot go down into his field, etc., but you could eat from the naitis. So the Gemara wonders, says, wait a second. Why could you eat from the fruits that are hanging out of the field because they paid the Daf Yomi? And once the Shemitah year, again, like let's say we just explained according to everyone, we said that you take it, it depends if you're taking the neder on the Shemitah year, whatever the case really is talking about, ultimately you said Shemitah is hefker, so you could eat from the guy's payers. But aranah me'afkara. But if that's the case, that the field's also hefker, in other words, to be able to pluck the fruits, so why can't you go into the field to take the payers? That's one of the permissibilities of the Shemitah year. So on that, the Gemara says two approaches. Ula says, we're talking about where the trees are on the boundary of the guy's field. So you're right. To pluck the trees that are in the middle of the field, that you'd be permitted to go into the field. But to pluck the fruit trees that are on the boundary, that you cannot, because the Torah didn't make the guy's land hefker. It's only to be able to go ahead and pick the fruits. Since these fruits are on the boundary and you could pick them not going to the field, that's why not going to the field, because the guy made it a ned on you. It's only as much as you need to get the payers. That's one approach why the field would still be forbidden. A second approach, he says, it was actually a rabbinic decree because that you might delay in your standing. In other words, therefore, according to his pshat, even to pick from the fruits that are in the middle of the field, you're not allowed to go inside of it, because although me'ikra din it's permitted, because you're right, the Torah makes it hefker, because of Gzeir it's going to be forbidden, because you might just decide to have a chapa shmizi. Oh, Yanko, what's it? You also came to get the hefker fruits over here in the shmiti, and you're standing there for an hour later, and the wife is calling and you didn't pick up because you're shmoozing. That would be forbidden, because that you have no heter for. So because of Gzeir shemiyishba amida, which now you can be over on the nether, therefore the Chacham said that you're not allowed to go in. But you're right, really, Ba'atzim, you'd be able to go into the field also, just like you're allowed to take the fruits. One last point, the Ran says, even though over here we see you might delay by standing, the Gemara and Daf Lametes Amad Aleph, by the Chayla, Shmuel was not geyser. He was only geyser Shemiyisha be Yeshiv, but we said you're allowed to stand in Bakachil, not sit, because you might sit too long and over, but not by Amida. Because if not so, you shouldn't be able to be back even standing. Says the Ran. No, the reason is because since normally when you come to visit someone, you sit down and you're requiring to stand, so that's a hecker, and he's not gonna delay by standing because it's uncomfortable. He's the one guy standing over here, everyone's sitting down. But over here, what the behecker is that usually when the guys come to pick fruits, you don't usually put out chairs for the guys, for everyone that wants to steal from your esrogim that you're trying to maintain over there. So there, it's be shaykh to make a gzeira even by when they're standing versus that of sitting, and therefore that's why we're making gzeira over here even by standing versus over there was only by standing. Thank you to any time for hosting us.